Hello and welcome to the Tianshan Centennial Library. My name is Lance and I'm a librarian here at Southwestern Adventist University. This video is part of a series where I talk about the library, how it works, and what skills you need to do research well. In this video, I will talk to you about how to figure out what you should write your paper about. Sometimes figuring out what your paper should be about can be the hardest part of actually getting a paper written. You've seen all of our tutorial videos, so you know all about how to do the research. You just need to be able to settle on a topic and get to work. It's pretty rare that you have total freedom to choose a paper topic. Usually you will have some idea what the class is about and what your professor expects from your assignment. Even if you don't know exactly what you want to write about, this is enough information to start generating some general concept keywords. You don't have to start nailing down your exact research just yet, but you can enter some relevant keywords into a search. Once you have some results to look through, you don't have to read any of them just yet. Most academic papers include an abstract section at the start of the paper. It gives you a general idea of what the paper is about, what methods were used, and sort of what the results were. Reading through some of the research that has already been done might be enough to spark some ideas of your own in terms of what you want to read more about. Another thing to consider is coming into the library and visiting the right spot. The English department has tutors in the library available during parts of the semester who can help you with every portion of the writing process, from understanding the assignment to brainstorming ideas, all the way through drafting and editing. They're a super helpful resource and can make the paper writing process much easier to start and finish. You can find more information on their website, swau.edu/academics/writespot. In this video, I will tell you about why you should come and talk to a librarian. The pop culture stereotype of a librarian is a simple one. We go around putting books on shelves and occasionally shush somebody who's louder than a micro whisper. Even though a nice, crisp shh can be a lot of fun, we actually have a lot more to offer. For instance, we can help you do research. In addition to the study guides we have posted on the library website, we can also help you in person, over the phone, through Zoom, or via email. We help people find resources for writing papers and answer questions about how to format citations. If you have a question about how to find something or how to do something, a librarian is a great person to ask. Pretty much every librarian got into the field because they feel like it's important and useful to help connect people with information, especially in a university setting. Asking us questions not only doesn't bother us, but it's also something we look forward to. And if you're really lucky, we might even give you some candy if you ask nicely. In this video, I will talk to you about the information landscape you're entering and why the skills the library is trying to teach you are so important. The amount of information you're having to deal with versus what your grandparents had to deal with at your age is absolutely bananas. Historically, the amount of information in the world doubled once every century. After World War II, that increased to once every 25 years. Now, thanks to things like the internet and artificial intelligence, some researchers think that we may be doubling worldwide information every day. That is an absolute ocean of information, and without proper navigational skills, it can be very easy to become lost. The rate of increase presents us with a second problem. Because new information comes so quickly, the usefulness of old information dwindles rapidly. This is known as information half-life. This means that not only do you have more information to sort through, what good information you do find is useful for a much shorter duration than in previous generations. You're going to need to be able to keep up to date at a much faster pace than ever before. As part of this phenomenon, there are people out there who are contributing bad information to that flow. Whether they're doing it on accident or on purpose, they are making it harder for people to find reliable information. The old saying, "A lie travels halfway around the world while the truth is still putting its shoes on," has never been truer than it is today, especially thanks to things like social media. For these reasons, universities have begun to emphasize the concept of information literacy in their curricula. Information literacy has 6 basic steps: understanding what your task is, figuring out what information you need to complete that task, knowing where to get that information, knowing how to separate what you need from what you don't, understanding how to use that information to complete your task, and understanding how to assess your process and results and make improvements if necessary. Your entire university education will teach you how to be competent in all of these areas, but the 2 where you will most come into contact with the library are knowing where to find information and knowing how to sort what you need from what you don't. The primary focus of the library is to be a central location where reliable information can be found and synthesized. The library staff are highly educated professionals whose purpose is to help students understand, navigate, and access information. In this video, I will tell you about what plagiarism is, why it's bad, and how to avoid it. Plagiarism is a fancy word for a fairly simple concept. It's taking the hard work somebody else has done and using it as if it was something you created. The implications are serious, however. It's the academic version of lying, cheating, and stealing all wrapped up into one package. It's probably the single fastest way to get an F on an assignment or in a class, and, depending on the context, it could even lead to expulsion from the university. There are 4 forms plagiarism usually takes. The first is a copy-paste of work into your paper that somebody else did. It's the same idea as copying someone else's answers on a test, and it's also the easiest to avoid. The second is called paraphrasing without attribution. This is when you take another author's work and rephrase it and pretend like it's your own work. There are times when it's appropriate to paraphrase another author's idea in your paper, but you must always provide a citation, just like you would with a direct quotation. The third form is plagiarism that happens accidentally. In the tornado of reading, note-taking, writing, and revising that paper writing can sometimes become, it can be easy to forget who said something you're putting in your paper, or to forget to give credit where it's due. Even though it happens by accident, this is still a form of plagiarism. Always do your best to keep good notes and have accurate citations. The fourth form trips people up sometimes. It's called self-plagiarism. Believe it or not, it's possible for you to steal from yourself. The work you have done for other papers is part of the collective body of knowledge. Reusing something from that body of knowledge without proper attribution is still plagiarism, even if you're the author of both works. In this case, however, citing yourself is generally considered bad form. What you would need to do is get permission from the professor that you submitted the first work to, as well as get permission from the professor you are going to submit the new work to. Given the serious nature of plagiarism, you might want to double-check your work before you submit it. Southwestern has a subscription to Turnitin.com, which is an automated plagiarism checker. You can submit your work there and see if anything you've written raises any red flags that could be a source of trouble. It isn't mandatory, but sometimes it helps to double-check. In this video, I will briefly talk about intellectual property rights and some related concepts that will be useful to know about during your time at Southwestern. In some ways, this is a complicated issue, with some lawyers dedicating their entire careers to handling intellectual property and nothing else. I will do my best to explain these concepts as simply as I can, but keep in mind that I am not a lawyer or copyright expert, and that my goal is to help you understand some basic concepts and not to provide legal advice. Whenever someone creates something, that creator has rights regarding who can use that creation and how money is made from it. If you watch sports or movies, you'll often see warnings about how it's against the law to reproduce or redistribute the program without the consent of the copyright holder. Without getting into what this looks like in the business world, there is one important area of copyright law that concerns educational situations. That is the concept of fair use. Fair use is a legal doctrine that promotes freedom of expression by permitting the unlicensed use of copyright-protected works in certain circumstances. Certain types of uses, such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research, are examples of activities that likely qualify as fair use. This means that you don't have to get permission from the copyright holder to do things like write a paper about a book that includes quotes from the book. This includes other forms of media as well. Keep in mind that you will still need to create a citation. Another interesting part of copyright law is what's called public domain. Intellectual property rights don't last forever. They eventually run out. In those cases, works are said to have entered the public domain, which means they belong to everyone, and everyone can use them however they like. While the actual physical painting of the Mona Lisa is owned by someone, the image of the Mona Lisa is old enough to be considered public domain. So, if you wanted to use the image of the Mona Lisa to sell cheeseburgers, that would be permissible. Public domain timelines vary by country, and even within just the US, it can be very complex to figure out when something has become public domain. As you can see from the information on screen, there are several different timelines for public domain entry depending on how and when something was made. For example, content created by or for a corporation enters the public domain 95 years after it was first published. Mickey Mouse was created in 1928, so starting in 2024, his original design will be considered part of the public domain. That means people other than Disney will be able to publish Mickey Mouse content legally. There is one more area of intellectual property that is helpful to know about. Some creators don't like copyright law as it currently stands, and will voluntarily publish their works under a different set of usage licenses called either Creative Commons or open source. Works published under these guidelines can be used by anyone freely if certain conditions are met, those conditions usually being that proper attribution is given, or that any work made from them is also considered open source and free to use. The most popular works created under these guidelines are teacher resources and computer software. I personally am a big fan of open source software and use it a lot. In this video, I will explain the different categories of sources you will find while doing research. There are three categories of source type: primary, secondary, and tertiary. Primary sources are the most important kinds of resource in academia, as they are the foundation from which all other work is built. In the humanities, primary sources are objects and records created at the time of an event or shortly afterwards by people who participated in or observed the event. They are things like diaries, letters, newspapers, pictures, and other things that capture and preserve a moment in time. In the sciences, primary sources are pieces of original research as reported by the original researchers themselves, often in the form of peer-reviewed journal articles. You create primary sources every day through things like texts, emails, diaries, and social media. Secondary sources are still useful in writing papers, but they shouldn't be your main source of information. These are items that take primary sources and provide commentary, context, criticism, and analysis of the information. These are works that are built on top of the foundation provided by the people who created the original information. The papers you write for assignments here at Southwestern will be secondary sources for the most part. The third kind of source, which will be the least impactful to your academic career, are tertiary sources. Tertiary sources compile or list primary and secondary sources. Things like textbooks, annotated bibliographies, and Wikipedia are tertiary sources because they only list information without creating anything new to think about. They're only indirectly useful for paper writing because they provide lists of things that might be helpful to read. Your professors are going to want to see only primary and secondary sources listed in your references when you turn in a paper because they provide the most meaningful information. In this video, I will tell you about how to filter your search results after you've done a search on the library website. Sometimes a search can be a pain because once you've entered your terms, you can be looking at thousands of results. It can be hard to tell which sources are going to be good to use for your paper and which aren't. When you're looking at your pile of results, if you look at the left-hand side of the screen, you will see a list of filters. There are a lot of options, but the two most important are pretty near the top of the list. The first filter that's going to be impactful for your paper writing needs is a checkbox for scholarly, peer-reviewed. This filter will limit your results to articles that have been published in peer-reviewed journals. Peer reviewing is a process where academics check each other's work in order to ensure that their methods are sound and that their results are accurate. Your professors are going to want you to rely very heavily on these kinds of sources, so it should be pretty much the first thing you do when you're looking at search results. The next most important filter is just below, and it's the slider bar for publication dates. Today's research is built upon the foundation of yesterday's research, which means that, generally, sources that have been published more recently are going to have better, more complete information. A nice guideline to go by is that the sources you use for your paper should have been published no more than 10 years ago. There are exceptions, but in most cases this works pretty well. In order to change what publication dates you're being shown, you can either slide the button on the bar, or you can enter dates in the boxes on either side of the words publication date. The other filters can be useful as well. The subject filter is great for adding context. If I search for potato, I can add the subject cooking to limit my results to just that context. All of the other filters are potentially useful and are worth looking at when you're trying to bring your results into a clearer focus. In this video, I will tell you about a couple of handy little search tools that aren't common knowledge but can make your searches even better. The first of these tools is the wildcard. A wildcard search term can be created by adding an asterisk to a group of letters. For example, if you added an asterisk to the start of IST, the search engine would look for every word ending in IST. If you added the asterisk to the end of IST, the search engine would search for every word starting in IST. You may be thinking to yourself that being able to search that many words at once isn't very useful, and you would be right. The wildcard is most useful when it is used in very exact and specific situations. The more precise you can be when creating a wildcard, the better. An example of a better wildcard would be something like ATHLET*. This searches athlete, athletes, athletic, and athletics with one term and without any unrelated results. The wildcard is useful for when you want to search multiple forms of a base word without having to enter them all as individual keywords. The second tool I will show you are quotation marks. In addition to making your searches look super edgy and sarcastic, putting quotation marks around your search term will tell the search engine to search for the exact phrasing of your search term. When you enter a search term, the search engine will search for all of the words, some of the other related forms of the word, and if you have multiple words, it will search for them in all orders. For instance, if we search for the term dancing dogs, the search engine will return results for dancing dogs, dances with dogs, dog dances, as well as results that only have dance or dog. If you put dancing dogs inside of quotation marks, the search engine will only return results that contain the term exactly as you typed it in. This is useful for when you have a very precise idea of what you're hoping to find, or if you're trying to find a specific source but you only remember a portion of the title. In this video, I will explain what Boolean operators are and how to use them to improve your searches. And, or, and not are the three Boolean operators. When you place them between your keywords change how they interact with each other. They can be somewhat counterintuitive at first, but once you understand how they work, they become very simple to use. And means that your search results must have both terms. This will really limit the number of results you're seeing. Or means that your results can have either or both terms. This will really open up the number of results you're getting. Not means that the second keyword will be excluded from your results. This will limit the results you're seeing, but not as much as and would. Let's use the beasts of ancient mythology to understand things a little better. For example, we could describe this Greek hippogriff as eagle and horse. The manticore is a Persian creature that has the body of a lion, a human head, the tail of a scorpion, and sometimes it has the wings of a bat. We might describe it in Boolean terms as lion and human and scorpion or bat. Parentheses are used to group things together. In this instance, it puts the first three terms in a group that is required, leaving the bat as the independent variable. How would you describe this Chinese hundun? It has the wings of a bird, the body of a pig, the feet of a bear or a lion, and it has no head. Pause the video and take a moment to think about what parts must be present, what parts might be there, and what parts must not be there. Are you back already? Wow, that was quick. Or maybe it took a long time. I don't know. This is pre-recorded. Did you come up with something along the lines of bird and pig and lion or bear, not head? I bet you did. You seem pretty sharp. Boolean operators aren't something you have to do in order to search, but if you're looking for something very specific or very exotic, they can be very helpful. It's probably likely that your searches will only use some of these tips, but it's good to know that the ability to go crazy is there if you need it. In this video, I will explain what controlled vocabulary is and how it can be useful for your research. There is a crazy amount of information out in the world today, and there's always more being created. There are tens of thousands of librarians worldwide who are constantly working to keep that data indexed and organized so that it can be easily found by professors, students, and researchers, just like the ones here at Southwestern. In order to keep things unified, librarians created what is called a controlled vocabulary, which means that they all agree to use the same words to describe the same things in the same way when they're organizing things. When choosing words, librarians have to be very careful. We don't always use words the way they would be used in regular speech, and some fields use a lot of technical language or jargon, which librarians might not be using to organize things. It's important to librarians that everything be as easy to find as possible, so you don't have to know all of this vocabulary in order to find things. But if you find yourself struggling to locate enough good sources on a topic, checking what words you're using can be a helpful way to shift perspective. Luckily, these lists are always publicly available. The most common form of controlled vocabulary is called the Library of Congress Subject Headings List. Every university in the United States uses this list to organize their own collections. The subject headings list can be found at the URL on your screen. You can check your search keywords by clicking on the letter that represents the first letter of your word, then scrolling down through the list until you find your word. There will be a list of other words underneath it, but the ones you'll want to change to, if any, have the word use next to them on the left. Some databases also have their own list of vocabulary. They may call their list a thesaurus. If you see that the database you're using has a link to a thesaurus or something vocabulary related, it is better to use their recommended language than the language from the Library of Congress. You don't have to do this for every keyword you use in a search, but if you're having trouble finding results, it can be helpful to change how you're approaching things. In this video, I will talk to you about how to browse in the library. You are probably pretty familiar with the concept of browsing. If you've gone into a store and walked around to see if anything interesting jumped into your cart, you've browsed. Browsing in the library isn't too different. Let's say you've used the search tool and found a book you want. The call number will take you to where that book is physically located on the library shelf. Shelves aren't organized willy-nilly, though. Everything is grouped together with other items of a similar subject. So if you find one thing you like and find it on the shelf, if you take a few moments to look around, you might be surprised at what additional titles jump out at you. While you can't walk up to the shelf of a digital item, you can still do a type of browsing. Academic works will have the works that they cited listed at the end of the article. Those can be a great resource for related research. Some databases will also display other articles that use the article you're looking at as a source for themselves. This is a great way to get additional sources that are relevant to the article you're looking at. Whenever you find something you're looking for, taking a moment to look around will usually be productive and will almost always be interesting. In this video, I will explain what subject databases are, how to find them, and how to use them to better your research. The search function on the library's homepage will allow you to search the majority of our online resources all at once. However, there may be times when you're looking to be much more specific in what places you're searching. Some databases are very private about how information gets accessed, or they may provide information that doesn't display well in a search engine results page. If you go to the top of our homepage and hover your mouse over the Research Tools tab, at the top of the drop-down list that comes up, you will see Articles and Databases. If you click on this, it will take you to a list of every database that the library subscribes to. There's a lot there, but I will show you a couple of ways to sort them to make what you're seeing much more relevant to what you want to do. By default, the databases are sorted alphabetically, but if you click on the drop-down menu on the left, you can sort them by subject. If you click on the subject you're interested in, you will be shown databases for just that subject. I clicked on Education, so now all of the resources we're seeing are related to education. If you click on the Center drop-down menu, you will be able to sort databases by the type of resource they provide. As you see, there are several different types. We have databases that specialize in things like photographs and art, music, video, and we even have several databases that provide Spanish language materials as well. I'll show you a few examples of things that you can only find by going directly to the database. For you business majors, IBIS World provides industry statistics and other financial information that you can only see if you go directly into IBIS World and look it up. The Medici TV database has tons of videos of various performances of ballet, opera, and other arts that can only be found by searching with them as well. The search tool on our homepage does provide you with a very large amount of our content, but there's more to be found if you go searching specifically. There are great things to find if you're willing to step outside of your normal searching habits a little bit. In this video, I will talk to you about research guides. Creating a research guide is one of a librarian's favorite things to do. They're handy little things where we can put together information and resources for commonly encountered hurdles or questions. They're great for students too, because you can find a lot of helpful information with the click of a button, and you don't even have to go to the trouble of asking anyone if you don't want to. The research guides created by librarians at Southwestern for students here can be found on the library website, library.swau.edu. If you hold your mouse over the Research Tools tab, a menu will drop down. From there, click on the word Guides. The default is to display all guides. You can scroll through the entire list, or if you like, you can have the guides sorted by subject by clicking the button at the top. Once you select a guide, there are links to all kinds of helpful resources. Don't forget about the tabs on the left, because they provide very useful additional content as well, such as information on how to create citations. It's also not against the rules to look at research guides from other libraries. They may not always be as useful to you as Southwestern-specific guides, because they often link out to resources you don't have access to, but they can provide additional perspective and information that can help you. For example, I have had students come ask me for help on creating a citation on something relatively exotic. In one case, an online bulletin from the World Health Organization. I don't know how to make a citation for something like that off the top of my head, so I looked up other research guides on citations, and I was able to come up with the right format. Librarians like sharing, and they like helping. Research guides are one of the ways we can do that 24/7 from anywhere in the world. In this video, I will tell you about how to borrow materials from other libraries. Libraries only have so much capacity for their collections. Even the Library of Congress, the largest library in the world, doesn't have everything in it. Luckily, you don't have to rely just on your local library's collection. Libraries cooperate with each other all the time to provide expanded access to their patrons. Here at the Jianshan Centennial Library, there are two main ways we do that. The first way is through interlibrary loan. If you see a book or article you need, but you don't have access to it through our collection, you can fill out a form with the item's details and request that we borrow it from another institution. You can find the form by going to library.swau.edu, hover over the Services and Support tab at the top, then clicking on Borrow from Other Libraries. Once you fill out the form, we can find it elsewhere and have it brought in for you to use. Usually the process happens quickly, but it can take up to a couple weeks in some cases. It's best to get your request in early just to be on the safe side. There's also another way to access materials from other libraries in Texas. Most libraries in Texas are part of the TextShare program. If you come into the library with your student ID card and ask for Tony, he can help you get a TextShare card. If you take your student card and your TextShare card to almost any library in Texas, you can borrow items just like you would here at Southwestern. We had one student not too long ago who was in a rush to get an item that was in Baylor's collection, and they didn't want to wait for the interlibrary loan process. They got a TextShare card and drove down to Waco to get it themselves. While not everybody is going to be in such a rush, if you don't live in Keene, it can be nice to be able to use a library that's a little closer to your home. Remember, just because we don't have something in our collection, that doesn't mean you don't have access to it. In this video, I will explain what references and citations are, why they're important, and how to create and use them. Conceptually, references are simple. They're the list of resources you used to write your paper and serve as proof that your argument is based on factual reality rather than being just made up. All academics list their references when creating a paper, including professors and professional scientists. References are a big part of what separates an academic work from a really long social media post. Citations are also simple. They are how you note in your paper when you're using words or information from one of your references. It's important to do that because it shows your readers where you're getting your figures specifically. They also help you avoid plagiarism by giving credit to the creators of the facts and words you're using from your references. If you haven't watched the video we did on plagiarism yet, it might be helpful to watch that one next. Writing references and citations can feel a little tricky, but hopefully by the end of this video you will feel much more comfortable making them. There are many ways to format your references and citations, but we will focus only on the three most common types. Those three types are MLA, APA, and Turabian. MLA tends to be used by languages and arts, APA tends to be used by the sciences, and Turabian is most often used by history and religion. Let's take a look at a reference. On the screen, I have a reference from the three main types for the same source. There are some minor differences in how things are formatted, but there are four types of information that are used to make a reference: who, what, when, and where. On the screen are those same examples from before, with those parts highlighted. Figuring out where all the punctuation goes can be tricky. We have guides on the library website that can help you figure out that part. We also have the style manuals here in the library for you to check with. Any librarian will be happy to help you figure out what to do if you're having problems. Citations are a little bit easier. There are parenthetical citations, which have the author, the year, and the page number of the source in parentheses at the end of a sentence inside the body of your paper. You can also include this information in what's called a narrative fashion. You work the information from your citation into your writing by referring to the author's last name. Then at the end of the sentence, you include the year and applicable page number of the reference in parentheses. Turabian formatting does both of these kinds of citations. However, it also has a third kind of citation called a footnote. For these, you just insert a footnote, which is a little superscript number in your text. At the bottom of the page, you will have a spot to put in the information you would have included in the other kinds of citation. For parenthetical and narrative citations, you can use both and freely go from one to the other as suits you. If you're using footnotes in your paper, you will only ever use footnotes and not the other two. I have included links to some helpful tools in the description. If you're having trouble, they might be of use to you. In this video, I will talk to you about a tool you can use to assess sources of information. The world is full of information, and the rate that new information is produced is staggering. Some estimates say that the rate of production could be doubling the worldwide amount of information every single day. That's a ton of information to have to sort through. In a lot of ways, doing research in an academic setting isn't like trying to find a needle in a haystack, but like trying to find a specific needle in a stack of needles. Sometimes the task of doing research can seem pretty daunting at first. Luckily, there are lots of tools that librarians have invented to help you through the process. The tool we're going to discuss is a mnemonic device to help you think about the process of information sorting. Invented by Jane Mandelios, the radar method can help us sort through academic resources and help us select appropriate materials to use in our work. Radar stands for relevance, authority, date, accuracy, and reasoning. Relevance can seem simple at first. Obviously, an article about Canadian boating history isn't likely to be relevant to medical research. However, it is something you have to keep an eye on. If you're researching brain tumor removal surgeries, there are differences in surgical approach for different kinds of tumors. Making sure you're researching the proper resources for the context can be subtle, but it is always important. Authority matters in judging the credibility of a resource. Experts who have years of training and experience in a subject are going to be much more knowledgeable than some random goober on social media. It can be tricky though. People can claim to have all sorts of credentials that they don't really have. Someone might call themselves a doctor and give out medical advice, but they really just have a doctorate in painting. If you're going to rely on someone for information, it's important that they have real skills, qualifications, and experience. Date is probably the easiest element to parse. Research is cumulative over time. This means that as time progresses, research information generally gets more accurate and more complete. This means that you will want to stick, as much as possible, to the most current research available. A good rule of thumb is to use sources that are less than 10 years old. Accuracy can be the most difficult element of a source to determine. It's important that resources have proper methods and accurate results. Most academic articles that will be useful for doing research will come from peer-reviewed journals. In a peer-reviewed work, other academics and researchers will have examined the article to ensure that the author's methods were sound and that their results were in line with reality. Sometimes you will have to make this determination without the aid of peer review, and it's important to make sure that the author's methods make sense to you and that their results don't seem outlandish. Reasoning is another element that seems like it would be easy, but can be tricky sometimes too. Everybody does things for a reason, and researchers are no exception. When you're reading an article, it's important to figure out why something was published. Are they professors who are sharing their work because they have a duty to, or do they have an agenda? A good example of this is old smoking research. Several decades ago, tobacco companies paid researchers to come up with data that they could use to say that smoking was healthy. The research was done by legitimate researchers, but their funding came with an implicit agenda that made their results untrustworthy even before the reporting on the results was manipulated for marketing purposes. This kind of thing still happens today, and it's important to be aware of it and to keep an eye out for it. These don't necessarily all have to happen in this order, but they are things that you should keep in mind when you are evaluating the resources you are using to inform your work. In this video, I will talk to you about a tool you can use to assess sources of information. The world is full of information, and the rate that new information is produced is staggering. Some estimates say that the rate of production could be doubling the worldwide amount of information every single day. That's a ton of information to have to sort through. On top of that, there are people who generate information that isn't accurate or reliable. They may or may not be doing this on purpose, but you have to sort through it either way. Luckily, there are lots of tools that librarians have invented to help you through this process. The tool we're going to discuss in this video is a mnemonic device to help you think about the process of information sorting. This device, created by Mike Caulfield, is a good general-purpose tool, and it is called, appropriately enough, SIFT. SIFT stands for Stop, Investigate, Find, and Trace. Stop being the first step in reacting to new information is super important. So much disinformation is designed to provoke and exploit strong emotions. The creator is trying to get people stirred up. They are trying to make you feel scared, angry, prideful, confused, or whatever in order to get you to react without thinking. When you see something crazy online, before you click on that clickbait headline or make an angry Insta post, just stop for a second. The next thing you should do is investigate the source. Are they well known? Do they have a reputation for supplying good information? Are they known experts in the field? What do Wikipedia or fact-checking services say about them? If they have a bad reputation, or if nobody has ever heard of them before now, there's a good chance that their information is not reliable. If the source seems okay, find out if anybody else is talking about it. Usually, if something important is happening, there will be multiple people who found out and are talking about it. If multiple trustworthy sources are talking about the same event and the details are similar, you can put more trust in the accounts being correct. Oftentimes, things are based on a small kernel of truth. If we trace the information back to its original source, we can discover the surrounding context of the situation. For example, if people are upset at a situation portrayed in a photograph, was the photograph cropped in a misleading way? Is there a video of the event that provides a more complete perspective? If an article says that a study showed that looking into the sun is good for your eyes, does it really say that? Or does the study make some other claim that the authors mangled to fit their agenda? Finding the original context can be hugely illuminating and often completely changes how we might view things. These steps don't necessarily always happen in this order, but they're all steps that are important to take as we engage with information sources. In this video, I will tell you about a few random but simple things you can do to make research easier and faster. Tip number 1 will help cut down on the amount of reading you may be doing. One of the format requirements for an academic journal article is that the start of the article must contain an abstract. An abstract is a brief summary of the article itself, including why the research was done, what methods were used, what the results were, and an overall conclusion. Reading just this first page will give you a good understanding of what the paper is about and if it will be useful as a source for your own paper. If you still need further information to make a decision, the next best thing to read will be the full conclusion at the end of the article. It will give you a little more information without being a ton more reading. Obviously, if you use the article in your paper, you will still need to go through and read the entire thing, but this will help you cut down on the amount of reading you're doing while trying to find sources. Tip number 2 is related to tip number 1. When you're looking for a book to use as a source, you don't have to read the entire thing to find out if it will be good to use in your paper. We have a few databases that provide access to book reviews. These book reviews will give a summary of the content and discuss its strengths and weaknesses. If you read these reviews, you can save a lot of time when trying to find a book to reference in your paper. Tip number 3 is to use a reference management tool. Some people like to have assistants when they're juggling all of the information they need to include in an academic paper. Zotero is an open-source browser add-on and word extension that lets you collect and manage source information to more easily use references and citations. Citation Machine is a free, ad-supported website that lets you input details for a source into a form that will produce a correctly formatted bibliographic entry. It makes ensuring the proper use of punctuation and italics a lot simpler. Tip number 4 is to chew gum. Studies have shown that chewing mint gum while studying and while taking a test helps improve memory and recall, and it helps reduce anxiety. It's not an enormous effect, but it's enough to have a measurable, positive impact. Just remember to be polite and throw the gum in the trash when you're done. Tip number 5 is to take breaks. Studying is a marathon, not a sprint. You have an entire semester to get through, and pushing too hard can lead to burnout. For every hour you study, you should give yourself a 10 to 15-minute break. Do something to get your blood moving, like going for a walk. Get some water, look out the window, and let your eyes have a break from reading. Staying fresh while you study will make your work time more productive and will help you do better in the long run. These are just some of the little things you can do that don't seem like much, but will add up to a meaningful impact on your studies. In this video, I will tell you about the technology-related services that the library offers. When it comes to thinking about the library, it's pretty easy for the mind to jump to books and then stop there. While we do have a great collection for you to go through, we also provide a lot of technological services that might also be of use to you. For instance, the library has great Wi-Fi to help you work on your laptop or phone. When you're ready to print, the library has printing, scanning, and copying available. You can even print wirelessly without having to log into our computers that we also offer for student access. If you don't have your own laptop but don't want to sit at one of the desks, we have laptops and iPads that can be used in the library as well. In emergencies, we also have a few laptops that can be checked out for longer periods of time. We also have mice and various charging cords you can use if you forget to bring yours with you. You can even get things laminated at the library. We're hoping to add new services in the future, so keep an eye out for that too. In this video, I will show you guys where to get some practice doing some of the things I talk about in this video series. Getting started with research and creating citations can feel intimidating. There are a lot of different things to keep track of, and sometimes it can be easy to feel lost. A good way to overcome those types of feelings is by getting in a little bit of practice, going through the process with step-by-step guidance that explains things and breaks them down into smaller chunks. I created an activity that will let you do that. The URL is on the screen, and I will put the link in the description of this video as well. This activity runs you through the process of selecting keywords for your research topic, searching for scholarly information sources, selecting a resource, creating a reference for that source, and writing an in-text citation for that source. The advanced option gets a little more detailed and incorporates some of the more complex tips and tricks that I have explained in other videos. The more you go through this process, the more natural it will become for you until you hardly have to think about it at all. This activity is a good place to start building that skill memory. Well, that's it for this video, guys. Thanks for listening, and don't forget that we have a bunch of other videos that can help you out. If you have any questions or need more help or information, don't hesitate to reach out to the library at the contact information on the screen.